Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the Path 11 podcast. I am your host, April Hanna. At the Path 11 podcast, we are here trying to deliver leading-edge research on consciousness, healing, and metaphysics. And just like you, we are trying to answer the big questions about life. Who are we? Why are we here? And what is our purpose? We hope by listening to our podcast, it will make each day you live on Earth a little easier to understand. And now for today's podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. This is actually a pretty original topic, I think, that I'm bringing to you guys. Not necessarily original. We've talked about consciousness and meditation before, but it's a new spin on it. And if you're a person that likes to solve puzzles, I think you might enjoy this conversation. So I am hoping during this podcast that you are going to hear an amazing truth that for the right unsuspecting person at the right unpredictable moment, it sparks genuine awakening. Now, I've had to say that a couple of times here. Thank God we have edited that, but that was something that I had learned in my guest's book, and my guest today is Dean Sluyter. I had the chance to review this book, The Dharma's Bun Guide to Western Literature. So if you're watching this on Path 11 TV, you could take a look at the book that I'm holding up right now. And Dean has led meditation workshops and retreats throughout the U.S. since 1970 at venues ranging from Ivy League colleges to maximum security prisons. And maybe we'll get a chance to hear about that. I think my guest has been in prison or jail before himself in the 60s there. And for 33 years, he taught English. And I am going to bring him on because he had one of those moments when he was 12 years old that blew the top of his head off by just, I think it was 3 words, right, Dean? What me worry.
Right.
And it was off of a Mad magazine. So, Dean, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Hannah. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So, now that I've gotten all of my little tries out of the way and trying to start this podcast, I would love for you to give my listeners just a little bit of background on your teaching history. It sounds like you were a little bit of a free spirit back in the 60s, traveling, living very simply. Mm-hmm. I also recently picked up and read the Tao Te Ching recently. So when you kind of had that in your backpack and were kind of taken off in the world, I just thought it would be fun for our listeners to get a little bit of a feel for you and who you are, and go for it.
Right. So as you've already indicated, started to have some sort of spontaneous experiences of, we could say, spiritual opening as early as 11 years old or 12 years old. The most dramatic one was the one you mentioned, where my mind was churning away, just full of anxiety. And I happened to pick up a Mad magazine, and there's grinning Alfred E. Newman and his motto, "What me worry?" And all of a sudden, I saw that, all this churning that's going on, that's got a name. That's called worry. And I've been doing it. It doesn't happen to me. I've been choosing to do it. It's like I've been going, gee, why is this engine racing? And then I realized, because my foot's been on the accelerator. And it's like, there's my foot. Take that foot off the accelerator. And my mind just went deliciously, expansively silent. And as you described, it really was kind of like the top of my head coming off, and just sort of my isness, my being sort of melting into the skies. To describe it in words like that, it sounds very woo-woo, I guess, but it really is just, this is, it makes sense that to not just go through life as a little constricted wave, but to find out, there's no separation between wave and ocean, so to speak. So that stuff started happening to me early on. I got up to San Francisco State College for my freshman year in 1966, 67. And then there I was. It was San Francisco. It was June of 1967. Those of you who know a little something about recent cultural history know that was the famous Summer of Love. And that was the end of college for me for a while. So basically, I just kind of was a hippie dropout, do-it-yourself holy man hitchhiking around the country with the Tao Te Ching and Thoreau's Walden in my little backpack. And yeah, it was great. It was a time when the first big influx of teachers from the East was coming in. And so I was able to sample around and, sit Zen at the San Francisco Zen Center and, meet Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and meet Swami Bhaktivedanta and Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, who led this band of joyous Hasidim and Sufi Sam and all these great, wonderful characters that were all just kind of on fire with, the fact that life is not just one damn thing after another. It's not just a bunch of little, just kind of drifting through space and time, trying not to get hurt too much, and then we die. But really, it's about reclaiming this expansiveness, this boundless beingness that we are at our core. So, sooner or later I had to make a living. I was interested in being married and having kids. And so I got a job at a very fancy prep school in New Jersey, where I taught English for 33 years. And pretty soon I was also running meditation programs there. I had this lovely course for juniors and seniors called Literature of Enlightenment. And everyone knew my classroom. They'd walk past my classroom, and instead of having the rows of, uncomfortable desk chairs, it had a circle of comfy couches for doing our lab work, which was meditation. And here I was in this very, traditional New Jersey prep school. All the other teachers in the blue blazers, and, it's kind of a Republican country club setting. And I was kind of the subversive hippie there, bringing this new element in. But I stuck around long enough, after 33 years, you finally go from dangerous radical to kind of, Mr. Chips, the kindly old teacher who's helped change some people's lives. So that was great. And while that was going on, because I was still pursuing my own meditation career and hanging out with some of these, yogis and rishis, but also every year I was coming back and teaching Huckleberry Finn again, and teaching The Great Gatsby again, Emily Dickinson, Walt Whitman. And so my perspective on them kept getting deeper and deeper. I'm coming back from, deeper meditation experience, bringing it to bear. And after a while, I realized, I've got to write a book of this stuff. I've got to I'm seeing stuff about Huckleberry Finn and The Great Gatsby that I haven't read anywhere else. I don't think anyone else has seen this stuff. So I put it all in here.
Yeah, and that's why I had said to our listeners, if you like to figure out puzzles or like to find out hidden messages, that's what I really loved about your book, and looking at the connection between you were basically translating for us, how we can find spirituality and consciousness, and these writers, prolific writers and poets are weaving that into their writings.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds to me like when you were moving deeper into your own consciousness studies, your consciousness opened up to be able to see it very differently.
Yeah, the fact that it was those two things. Anyone who practices meditation regularly, you go into that place of just being, where you percolate down between doing and thinking and feeling to just being. Everything gets quiet, and you come back with more clarity for whatever you're doing, whatever you bring it to bear on. If you bring it to bear on flipping real estate or raising children or playing piano, whatever, you're going to do it with more clarity and more kind of radiance coming to it. In my case, I happened to be teaching literature. So, it was kind of inevitable that those things got put together. So, for example, in Huckleberry Finn, early in the book, through the whole book, Huck and Jim, the runaway slave, they're looking for freedom. Well, looking for freedom, that's the central theme of the spiritual life. In the Indian philosophy, they call it moksha, liberation, where we're liberated from the constrictions that make us feel like a little wave instead of an ocean. So he's running away. On one shore is the widow Douglas, who is this very genteel Christian lady who's adopted him, and she's convinced she's going to civilize him. But every time, Huck, who's narrating the book, every time he says civilize, he spells it with an S. And every time we see that S, we know, that's never going to happen. And she's got him wearing starchy clothes and, having to say prayers over the meals and go to school and all that. So that side, things are too stiff. Then his pap, who's this horrible, brutal alcoholic, comes and takes him away and kidnaps him and takes him to the other side of the river, where they're in this little cabin, and pap almost kills him. And so their things are too loose. It's too chaotic. So what does he do? He gets on the river, goes down the middle. Now that's the Buddha's teachings, right? Not too tight. There's actually a story where a guy comes to the Buddha and says, tell me how to meditate, tell me how to live my life. And the Buddha says, what do you do? He says, I'm a musician. I think he played the veena, a stringed instrument, like a violin. And the Buddha asks him, well, when you tune your instrument, do you make the strings as tight as possible? And he says, no, that's not good. Then do you make them as loose as possible? No. So there's this place between tight and loose, this golden middle way. That's where it is. So that's where Huck and Jim are when they get on their raft and they go down the river.
Yeah.
And then I just kept seeing one thing after another like that.
Yeah. And, like what I hear in that too is finding the middle ground of when you come into like your spiritual awakening and kind of feeling that bliss, but still here on earth and still needing to live here. It's like being of both worlds.
Yes. That's exactly right. People hear the middle path. And I talk about this in the book, and they often think, that means being lukewarm, being some kind of boring compromise. But that's not what it is at all. When you're on the middle path, you're in the river, that is qualitatively completely different from the rocks and the mud on the shores. It's flow. It's flow. And when you find that place, as you say, where you're connected to the bliss of beingness, but you got your feet firmly on the earth, and you find how to integrate those. That's the flow. That's what symbolized, over my shoulder there is a figure of Lord Ganesh with a human body and an elephant's head. That's not there because I'm expecting some guy with an elephant's head to walk through my door. These are all symbolic representations of what we look like when we're awakened, right? And the elephant is the animal with it's the biggest animal, the biggest land animal. So the elephant represents the vastness, the infinite. It's a symbol of what in Indian philosophy is called Brahman, the boundless, and what I've been calling the ocean. So having the human body and the elephant's head symbolizes exactly what you were talking about, having your feet on the ground, being here in the world of time and space, but your head, your consciousness is expanded to the timeless, the spaceless.
I love reading the chapter on the cat in the hat.
Mm-hmm.
And, you were kind of looking at the illustration of the cat and the way that it kind of had the smile and the thumbs, the way that the thumbs were positioned.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also went into, and I had never heard of this before because I haven't studied the culture as in depth nearly as you have, but the colors of the red and the white of the hat.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could kind of go into that a little bit, because that also correlated with the red and white colors. Was it with Buddhism?
Yeah, it's in the yogic teachings.
Yogic teachings, yeah.
In the yogic teachings, which are kind of held in common in historically in the Hindu world and the Buddhist world. Really, the yogic teachings are a practice path. And it's not just about, in America, yoga is often understood to be, okay, I'm going to, master these postures and, firm up my butt or something. There's that level of it, but that's the most superficial level of it. And in the yogic teachings, there's this idea of energy streams, what's called the Ida and the Pingala, which are, one is the more kind of passive, cool energy, and the other is the more aggressive energy. It's like the lunar and solar sometimes symbolize that way, symbolizes white and red. And they're connected in yogic practices actually with the breath streams through the two nostrils. The stream through the left nostril is cooling and through the right nostril is warming. Actually, way back when I started teaching at that New Jersey prep school, the Pingry School, for a couple of years, they made me an assistant winter track coach. And I had to stand out there in the middle of the track. The kids were warm. They were running around. I was freezing. And so I would stand there and very casually just close my left nostril so I was breathing through the right nostril, which is the warming breath. And sometimes the kids would ask me, "What are you doing?" And I would show them, "Oh yeah, that works." So the cat's hat is alternate red and white stripes, which indicates an integration of the two. But it's 3 red stripes, 2 white stripes. So it's not exactly, it's a little more preponderance to the red, which for those of us who don't live in caves or ashrams, we have to be out here in the active world. That's about the right mix, about 3 to 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in numerology, it's interesting you mentioned the word freedom. I learned from a numerologist that the number 5 carries the energy of freedom. So interesting, 3 stripes. And I remember you writing in the book. Now, did the person illustrating this have an idea? Were they thinking of this? No, probably not at all. But, when, like you said, when you begin to look into things and see them deeper and try to apply meaning to it, it's auspicious and very interesting,
Look, as I say in the book, asking the artist what's there in the art is like asking the chicken about the mineral content of the egg that it lays.
Right.
When you and I know this as a writer myself and as an amateur musician, when you're really in the flow, you're not thinking. Stuff is coming, and you go back. I just this morning reread a chapter for something new I'm working on that I had been, wrote the other day, and I rewrote it and went, "Whoa, wait, did I write that? Where did that come from?"
Right. Yeah, because you move into that space, like you said, a flow. Speaking of musician, I had to highlight this because I didn't know this either, and I shared this with my husband. It was, let me see, go to my tab here, of William Blake and where the Doors got their name.
Oh, yes, the Doors got their name.
Can you talk about that? Can you share about that? The Doors of Perception here?
Yes. So William Blake is my first chapter, who is just the incredible visionary poet. This was a guy who at the age of 4 was seeing God leaning his forehead against the bedroom window. All right. And he wrote and it did these wonderful pictures and poetry integrated together in these little beautiful handmade books that he and his wife made. And what's great is that his writing is so visionary, but the language is so simple. It's so clear. You can't miss it. So he said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would see everything as it is, infinite. Mm-hmm. Right? If the doors of perception, the fact that everything looks to us like a bunch of little disconnected waves, and here's a Dean wave over here and a Hannah wave over here and a microphone wave, the fact that we're seeing that instead of just saying, oh, it's just an ocean arising in all these waves and playfully waving at itself. The fact that we don't see that is just, it's like we need to spritz our windshields, that with the doors of perception need to be cleansed. And Aldous Huxley, in the 20th century, when he, in the 1950s, early 50s, he was one of the pioneers in experimentation with psychedelics. And he wrote a book about his experiences called The Doors of Perception, which borrowed that line from William Blake. And then a band that started about a mile from where I live, right? I'm in Santa Monica. They're over there in Venice. Jim Morrison and his buddies, they borrowed that line from Aldous Huxley, and they called their band The Doors.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, staying on William Blake. So for those of you who are watching on Path 11 TV, this is going to be good because you're going to be able to see the picture that I'm referring to. Mm-hmm. So this was the cover of chapter 1. And then you kind of talked about his writing, but also shared another picture, which he drew, which kind of seems to be this enlightened being with light coming out all around him, and the face does look pretty similar. But when I got towards the end of the book about the Star-Spangled Banner and reading your interpretation on that, and you had talked about the Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty, and her crown, that made me also think of, with the rays coming up and out, bringing it all the way back to the very first picture of William Blake in here and being illuminated.
Thank you. Now, see, there's an example of what we were talking about. I didn't make that connection. You saw that. I didn't see that. Did I put that there? Somehow it got there. But isn't that what, we're so used to seeing that image of Lady Liberty and kind of, what is it, spikes or something coming out of her head. Those are not spikes. That's rays of light. That's illumination. She's got, her crown chakra is open. And the name of that statue, as I mentioned, it's called Liberty Enlightening the World.
Right.
Liberty Enlightening the World.
Mm-hmm.
And again, connecting this back to the literature, when I write about Emily Dickinson, Emily Dickinson wrote in a letter to a friend, when I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. Right? So that's what poetry is supposed to do. Not just some pretty, decorative rhyming stuff. It's supposed to blow your mind.
Yeah.
It's supposed to open your head up to the boundlessness.
Yeah, and that's what I think, good poetry does too. It allows the reader to be the interpreter, and like you said, you didn't make that connection. I made this connection, and just looking at things, everyone can perceive it very differently. It can make each individual feel something different. Yeah. But you also made me take a look at the flag differently, of the national anthem, "Oh, say, can you see?" and relating that back to the repeatedly asked question in Dharma. Can we truly see? So I was hoping you could talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, say, it's the same issue that Blake raises, the doors of perception being cleansed. Oh, say, can you see? Right? We hear this stuff so many times. It's so familiar that we don't hear it.
Right.
Oh, say, can you hear? Oh, say, can you see? Right? Do you see what's going on? Also, I make the point, people mishear the Star-Spangled Banner. They think of it as a march, a triumphant march, like we're marching off to victory, right? It's not a march, it's a waltz. It's in 3/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Oh, say, can you 1, 2, 3, dawn's early 1, 2. That's a waltz. Now, waltz, when you march, you're going, okay, we're going to go from here to here. We know where we're going. We're going to march over there and, conquer that territory or whatever it is. Left, right, left, right. When you're waltzing, you're whirling. It's a more female kind of energy. And you're whirling around in these graceful circles, and you don't know where you're going to wind up. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, that anthem, that's that's like the national mantra of our country. That's what we really are. We keep trying to be that other thing. We keep trying to be, G.I. Joe, but we're really, Cinderella at the ball or something. And it's also, people think of the national anthem as assertive. It's not assertive. It doesn't end with a period or an exclamation mark. It ends with a question mark. Mm-hmm. It's an eternal question that we have to ask in every generation, which is, oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Is our commitment to this being a land of freedom, of liberation, of moksha, is that still there?
Yeah, interesting.
I've got very happy to have an endorsement on the cover of the book from Ken Burns, the great documentarist, and who I know him actually through my wife. My wife is a documentary filmmaker, and she worked with Ken. And he recently had a wonderful 2-part film on PBS on Benjamin Franklin. And he, there's the great story after the Constitutional Convention, and the people are, the men who've written the Constitution are walking out, and one woman asks Franklin, "Well, Dr. Franklin, what do we have? Is it a monarchy or a republic?" And he says, "A republic if you can keep it." And I'd heard that before, but I kind of really heard it. And I sent an email to Ken. I said, that is so moving. That's like our national koan. That's the perpetual question. Can we keep it? And, it's, I don't want to get into a lot of politics at the moment, but it's, clearly that's a very, acutely alive question for us right now.
Yeah. Well, and also just kind of going back to the Star Spangled Banner and your connection to it being a waltz and more of a circle,
Mm-hmm.
the image that flashed in my mind, birth, death, rebirth,
Mm-hmm.
really like the cycle of life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're also talking about the flag in your book too, the stripes and the stars, that reminded me of the saying, as above, so below, looking at the stars in the sky and, the stripes kind of being more of the land. And again, there we are in the middle, in the middle of
Right.
both of those.
Right. And the red and white stripes on the flag are like the red and white stripes on the hat, on the cat's hat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. All right. Meditation is easy, you had said. Let me go to this little sticky that I have here. And this was kind of more in the beginning. And I love the fact that how you described your classroom, because I would that would be my type of teacher, I don't know how you got couches in there, but that's pretty cool. And, you talk about how meditation.
I'll tell you how I did it.
Yeah. All right. How did you do it?
I didn't ask anyone.
You
Just did it.
What do they say?
There's a saying, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it sounds like I'm sure all the kids love to be there. And, I loved the way that you looked at it. You said for 33 years, I got paid to sit around reading books and talking about them to intelligent people, younger people. So you talk about meditation also being very easy, and you said, 15-year-olds can do it. It's not a hard thing. Then I'm curious, when you were going into the prisons, were you teaching meditation, or were you kind of introducing them more to the literature? What were you doing?
No, I teaching. Technically, I went in as a Buddhist chaplain, a volunteer Buddhist chaplain. And, I can teach from a Buddhist point of view, Hindu point of view, Christian point of view, secular point of view. To me, as a friend of mine said, I honor truth wherever I can find it. I need all the truth I can get. So I'm kind of spiritually promiscuous. So I said, they needed, this is Northern State Prison in Newark, New Jersey. It's considered the worst prison in New Jersey. And they needed a Buddhist chaplain. So I said, oh yeah, I can do that. And went in and in that context, taught meditation to these guys. And it was great. I love teaching in prison. The guys are, the Buddha once said, practice, do your meditation, whatever's your spiritual practice. He said, do it like your hair is on fire. Right? And these guys, he said, do it like someone has just dumped a bunch of poisonous snakes in your lap. Right? And these guys, they have that sense of the urgency of the matter. For them, it's not, oh, okay, this weekend I'll take the meditation workshop, and next weekend I'll take the macrame workshop or something. They know, no, this is really important. In a previous book of mine, this is my 6th book, and in a previous book of mine, I tell the story about one of our guys who got sent into segregation, what they call, which is solitary confinement, for 6 months. Yeah. And they actually moved him to another prison where they could put him in a cell just above the boiler room. So it was like 90-something degrees day and night. It was horrible, brutal. And, when he came back 6 months later, he told me, well, it was really tough at first, but I figured, okay, it's hot. Take off my clothes. There's nothing to do. I'll make this a meditation retreat. So basically, nothing going on the outside. I'll go inside. So basically, he meditated for 6 months. And boy, when he came back, that picture that you held up from the Blake chapter, the guy, the radiant guy, that's what this fellow looked like after 6 months on meditation retreat. So yeah, I love teaching, and I still do that. I'm 3,000 miles away, but when I'm on the East Coast, I visit there, and also I send video messages. So I'm still in touch with those guys.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what his integration was like, to be in that type of confinement and not having a ton of stimulation, and just the reintegration of coming back in, after going within, for such a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I've dealt with that myself. I've been on meditation retreats for months at a time, and the reintegration, you have to take it easy a little bit. They used to tell us, don't go to the disco the first night.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Now, in working with people in prison, and we were talking about freedom a little bit earlier, how long did you work with them, and were you able to see transformations of the way that they perceived, being there? And were they able to find more freedom within themselves after they learned meditation?
Yeah, I started going into Northern State Prison in 2005. And is that right? 2005? Yeah, I believe so. And was going every Thursday night until 2010 when, well, what happened was a few years earlier, my first wife had passed. And after a few years, I met the lovely woman I'm married to now. Met both of my wives on meditation retreats, by the way, which I recommend, way better than singles bars.
Yeah.
And so after 3 years of cross-country roaming, I retired from my teaching job. I sold my house in New Jersey and I moved out here. But I still go to back east. I've still got family and friends and students, meditation students there in the Northeast. So we still go back several times a year. And before COVID, I would go, and every time I was there, I'd make sure to go in on a Thursday night, because they still meet without me. Then, and the more senior students help teach the newer students, which is great. That's what's supposed to happen. A good teacher's supposed to make himself obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So them learning the meditation you found allowed them a little more freedom within themselves too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The transformation was so dramatic. There's a wonderful fellow. This is Officer Mercado. And he's the officer who works at the door of the chapel where we meet, which is really just kind of like a cinder block bunker with a great big loudspeaker right over the middle of it. So we'd be in the middle of the meditation and these announcements come, attention all areas, attention all units, Spanish choir out to the gym, which is great because the guys learn, doesn't matter what's going on. You don't have to be distracted, but you don't have to buy into it. You don't have to block it out. Whatever's going on, just be with it, which is really the key to meditation. That, people think, you have to control your thoughts and clear your mind and calm your emotions. No, that's an endless task. No one can do that. That's self-defeating. That's any effort to create a non-agitated state of mind is itself a form of agitation.
Creates more agitation.
Right?
Yeah.
You wind up chasing your tail. So what I was fortunate enough to learn early on from my teachers, and what I passed on to my guys in prison and my students in school, and through my books, and also, by the way, I lead meditation via Zoom 3 times a week, free, open to everyone. Anyone who'd like to join, just come to my website, deansluyter.com, and they can get the spelling of that from you.
Yeah,
because the spelling's tricky. It's SLUYTER.com. So what they learned was, you can just be there, the speakers blaring, whatever. And so Officer Mercado, who's this wonderful, he's this, guy, he's got several black belts and just a gentle, sweet soul. And he was there at the lobby of the chapel checking everyone in. And after a couple of years of this, I realized, he's hearing everything too.
Mm.
He's hearing everything I'm saying. He's hearing me guide the meditation. And he actually came to me and he said, you're really giving these guys something worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
He said, like that guy was just like the most, the angriest gangbanger in this place. He's completely transformed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
cool.
I'm very lucky in my life that I get to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, before we kind of sum this up, in your book here, I know you've highlighted 22 people. Is there one in particular that really is your favorite, or was another kind of mind-blowing, revelation when you went back to some of the readings of any of these authors?
Oh, boy, this is like choosing which of my 5 grandsons is my favorite. I mean, writing after 30 some years of teaching Macbeth, to be able to write the Macbeth chapter and squeeze, kind of tease out what's going on there with the three witches and what's going on with double, toil and trouble, all of that. I mean, that's tremendous fun. And Moby Dick, which I had never read, actually. I spent 33 years faking it, telling my students how great Moby Dick was, and I had never read it. So I finally had to read it. And I start the chapter by confessing that and discovering that, turns out Moby Dick is as great as I've been telling people, and greater, and actually weirder and funnier. Moby Dick is hilarious. But man, if I had to choose one, probably Emily Dickinson.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this woman who outwardly basically did not have a life. She was like a monk. She tended her garden. She took walks in the fields with her dog till her dog died, and baked, cookies for the local kids. And that was it. Lived in her parents' house until she died. And unbeknownst even to her family, was sitting in her upstairs in her second floor bedroom, writing these poems, and left behind 1,800 and something poems that, not all of them, but a whole lot of them, just knock the ball out of the park. Writing things like, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. Right? Can you hear that?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door. Well, that's how you meditate.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you live a life in the light. It's interesting, not knowing when, but opening every door means not just when, but where, every direction, leaving yourself wide open, omnidirectionally wide open. I used to study with these lamas in the Tibetan tradition called Dzogchen. And in Dzogchen meditation, you don't close your eyes. You just sit with your eyes wide open and your mouth hanging open, and you kind of look like an electrified bird on a wire or something. And the teachers say your pores wide open, everything 360 degrees wide open, because what are you blocking out? All of this is it. All these waves are the ocean. Why would you close to any of them?
Right. Well, this was so much fun. I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk and to have you on the podcast. Opened my eyes, and it was a lot of fun to read this and look at things much differently. And that's also what I hope our listeners get out of this. So you talked about your free meditations. Can you also just let our listeners know what else you're doing, if you are teaching any meditation retreats or anything like that, and where they can find your book?
Yeah, I just did. I haven't been traveling as much as I used to, just because things are still, everyone's a little bit unsure about reopening live events after COVID. But I do live events basically when I'm invited. I just did a thing out in New Hampshire and Connecticut. Just did a day-long retreat here in Santa Monica. And yeah, Zoom meditation free, open to everyone, usually 3 times a week. And I've got information about my books. I've got videos. I have you can link there to my YouTube channel, where I have a lot of guided meditations archived. So if the Zoom times don't work out for you, you can just look at the videos. And the main thing, I just have so many people that come to me. Just had a new person about 2 weeks ago join the Zoom classes. And this is a guy who's been trying to meditate for years. And right there's the key word, trying to meditate, right? And again, just thanks to my own wonderful teachers, I've gotten very good at just, yanking that rug of effort out from under people, so that they just kind of go into free fall. So yeah, I invite everyone to join.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening. We will put those links in the show notes. And again, the book, The Dharma's Bum's Guide to Western Literature. There it is, by Dean Sluyter. All right. Take care, everyone. And I will bring you another amazing guest next Monday. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate and review the Path 11 podcast in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, this podcast is made possible by our sponsor, Path 11 TV. Visit path11tv.com to start a 7-day free trial and start streaming over 100 hours of exclusive video content on consciousness, healing, and life after death. That's path11tv.com, and be sure to use coupon code podcast30 to take 30% off your annual membership. Start satisfying your spiritual curiosity with a membership to Path 11 TV today. Bye for now.